This is really a major problem, because once you've established a pond with healthy fish in it and you have a nice balanced population, it's always a risk to introduce new fish. They can be coming from domestic sources that you don't have a history on. They can be coming from a foreign country or Japan or wherever. But you really, unless you have really good knowledge of what those fish have been infected with, they can be carriers. They can be asymptomatic. So they may look healthy when you get them, but you mix them with your fish that don't have any immunity to whatever they have, and then they're going to get sick. So this is, to me, the worst possible scenario is bringing in these questionable fish.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we're trying to avoid. That's what we've done. That's what we've seen, when we brought in our brood stock, is this unknown. So you take a farm, the scale of ours, our investment, and we don't protect that. If we were to then be bringing in all these fish from Japan or all these fish from Israel or Indonesia or wherever, doesn't matter what country, we would risk our farm substantially with every box that comes in, because all you do to get fish into the U.S. is a USDA veterinary inspects them at the airport. They look in the bag. If it's alive, it goes. If it's dead, it's an issue. Doesn't mean that the fish is healthy because it's alive, because it could be carrying who knows what. The monster parasite, the bacterial infection, and then we open the bag and it runs rapid around our farm. So we can't, risk that. If we bring in, and we have to sometimes bring in males to introduce to our better breeding stock, and we cross the Japanese with our domestic stuff. But those fish, if they come in, we don't use those fish for 2 years. It takes you 2 years to actually feel confident in an isolated area that you're going to be able to use those fish. That's a fact. If you let it go and use that fish prior to that, you're risking it all. So that has to be always a factor in our risk management. John, I think you can talk about that, KHV carriers. A few years ago, there was a country that brought in fish. They were really KHV carriers. When you go to, we call those KHV ponds now. And they've put these fish in. They're carriers of KHV. You go to put another fish in from Kloubec or any other person that grows fish in the U.S. or even overseas, they die.
Well, koi herpes virus is one of the herpes viruses that affects koi. It's very contagious, very lethal. So if you bring in a KHV infected fish, that fish may have immunity to it. It's been exposed to it before. It's carrying the virus, and fish have very, very sophisticated immune systems, almost as much as any vertebrate. You have fish that have this immunity. They're brought in mixed with what we call a naive population. They spread the virus. It's very contagious, like I said, and those fish then get really sick because they have not had prior exposure to it. There's other virus diseases of koi, but KHV is the one that seems to be the most problematic at this point in time.
So that being said too, is we want to be a responsible farm, okay? And a responsible farm is to keep check on your animals, make sure that you're doing everything you can to prevent this. Because the thing that worries me probably the most is a state finding, and has already, cases of KHV in a private lake or in a river or stream. That outbreak, for example, like in Minnesota, was related back to a koi pond, okay? So those fish did come from an overseas country, but it affected the wild population of that lake. Nobody's gonna be enjoying this hobby if that happens, because the states will shut you down. There is a state, Maine, that doesn't allow koi, just for that purpose, for the fear of it breaking out in that state. Say it happens in a couple of more states and we have an irresponsible dealer that just buys these fish in, puts them in a garage, and really don't care about the health problem. It's all about the money. It's not about the investment. That dealer is here and gone the next year. There's another dealer pops up. And then there's the koi clubs. The koi clubs have to be responsible for what they're showing in those clubs. You know, and we had to stop going to koi clubs because we didn't see the responsibility taking place in the expectation that you would think in those clubs that you know, provide health to their livestock. It was kind of a show thing, a show piece, but they still has to have animal husbandry, be responsible for your koi, to make sure that you don't spread it to maybe a dealer like me sitting there with exposed fish. Those fish could never come home to our farm. So some of the clubs got it, some of them still don't. So we decided to kind of opt out because we could not risk our farm to bring fish that were maybe from Japan, Indonesia, wherever it was bought. That could be carriers, maybe not. Maybe a fresh batch came in. There have been outbreaks of KHV at shows. You know, Israelis had an outbreak at a show we were at in Chicago several years ago. So that falls into mine as like, you have to protect yourself. You have to just kind of isolate yourself from that, provide a good product, ship it out. And that's what I think gives us the edge there of being responsible in your husbandry of the fish, of the animal, just as you are with your dogs and cats. You know, don't let your dog run around with a rabid coon. It's not healthy, okay? So that's, you know, we kind of reframe it to the use of animals because they are animals. They are, you know, just under the water. So protect them, and that's, you know, that's what we do here at Kloubec Koi.